Nothing? Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I had like an English essay that I had to type last week, and I had a math test, and a math group test, and history test, and a science test.
What? Are they like kind of prep you for finals when you get into high school? Good morning.
Because they do
I wanted to talk to you.
Oh, I just passed him in the phone.
Oh, then he probably was like, I was talking to Tuesday.
Could be.
I just talked to you.
We had a shared pastoral experience last that he probably wanted to
Oh,
regroup.
oh,
Both were talking to the same person, but then we had to
ah,
shut down the building and get things done.
Noise.
Yeah. It was a really good experience.
Oh, good.
He's probably going to be in junior high today, but we'll see which service. Don't know yet.
Okay, cool.
just making us. Well, so on like February, we have like a whole bunch of like test months, and so that's for for English. That's what we're doing. But for the other classes, we're just taking.
I bet that's a good sign, like, to prepare you for finals. Yeah.
Are you just like overloaded right now?
Tests in every subject.
Good morning, reading.
It's not like, it's harder to study for 5 things than it is to study for 1 thing, right? It's all just the same.
I mean, I did fine on all my tests. You had science for me. I got my stars back. My history when I got an A plus. My math individual, I got an A plus. And my math group test, I got an A.
Are you more in the group of you pay really good attention in class so you know all the answers, or more in the group of like you study your butt off before the test comes out?
Neither.
Neither? How do you do it? What's your method of knowing the answer? How do you know it?
I just like know it. I don't know.
Just
listen? No, I don't really listen. I just like I don't know. I just like know all the answers. I just do it and I'm done.
You absorb information well.
But that's like
auditory learner.
that's the only subject I can do it in.
Oh, just history?
No, Pete math.
Oh, but you said you got an A plus on your history.
And I'm
How did you do the history one?
no, that's a good notes.
It was open notes taking.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Good notes.
Yeah, if it's open notes.
Open notes.
And it was only like 10 questions and there's only 10 points. So
That's still good though. That means you didn't actually zone out like you should have been taking notes.
if like I didn't use my notes, I probably would have got like 9. Cause like I only like didn't know.
Sometimes just the fact that you sat there and took the note just throws it into your head. It's never leaving. What's that? Where do you think you left it? Oh, Rome Star. I was thinking the one you thought you left it for.
I just made the Jordan.
There you go.
How you doing, my dear?
Bringing it. So I'll come to church with no stars and leave church with 2 stars.
Not fun.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm like
Yeah.
a little bit jealous.
Yeah, I've been trying to work.
There you
Did you
go.
come play with the trash cans? Too?
Fun and painful.
Yeah, I'm a little bit painful, but mostly fun.
That's good.
Question. Is this too disgusting if I said like it's written that was typed? Because I can be like way too much if I can white it out. You sure? You were like, do you guys have whiteout? So I'm just gonna spin.
Maybe.
Don't look for it.
Don't?
It's fine. Look for it.
No, so it was my fault that happened. I printed you out a blank copy
I've got one of these
and
things.
then I left it at home.
Those are the best. We use
Got a
those all
wallpaper
the
on it.
time at school.
I don't know why. I think it's just attached in the drawer.
What's on it?
One of those 3M stick-on wall hangers.
Oh,
So it has a.
Look at that.
those things are.
We're so set. I was even sitting in the sanctuary thinking, I just had one of those things.
I think my favorite thing about those things is that unlike normal whiteout, if you're good with like a X-Acto knife or a pocket knife, you can take it back off.
Bring it back.
It's really cool that you can just kind of add and remove white from your page as often and as much as you need to.
Oh, this is so rewarding.
I didn't know those existed until I worked at the kennel.
Well, they didn't exist when
Yeah, I
we were
did.
kids.
For several years. It was fantastic.
It's weird to live in an age where
Do you want to do one?
a lot of the inventions that we now take for granted were invented while we were alive.
Yeah.
Whereas
So you didn't
now,
know they were there.
almost all modern invention is somehow technological. Whereas this is mechanical and chemical.
Hi.
There's,
Yeah.
there's nothing electronic about
This
this.
is for 62. Mess her up. I tend to make really pretty sheets. They know.
I didn't know that was possible.
I tend to like change the key a lot, and I just scribble it out and write the new one in. And they're like, you have no idea what you're saying.
How easy is it to play the wrong chord when the wrong chord is written on the page?
Yep. Because I'm nice like that. It's a challenge. Well, then I was like, if I just rewrite this on my hand, like, no, that's not gonna work either.
It's insane. We could just print out new music sheets. This is true. No one would be laughing if I just printed out new music sheets.
Well, I did
Or
that,
mesmerized.
and I left them at home.
Oh, that'll do it.
I'm just super right brain this morning.
You do. Good job.
It's a constant battle.
I spotted this. Good morning, dear.
Yes.
We've made it. Therefore, it is good morning.
Never arrived.
We have arrived.
Now what?
Don't die.
Oh, okay.
Do that, and you have succeeded. Yes.
Yay.
What do you mean?
Right?
A little clicky sound.
You want to say hi to the girls?
Right? I know.
It's just tape.
Look,
It's
Oh,
just
it's
tape.
tape.
that's for you.
But it's
That's
tape
the same
made
song.
out of a breakable
Ah.
material, so that every time you pull away from the paper, it just breaks apart. The only reason it stays together on the page is because it's adhesive on the back. So it's like a bunch of broken old pieces of white that are sticky taped to the
This
paper.
is new,
Stage in the
and if you are like, then you can just chill. The chorus is like really easy to follow. But if you're not feeling great about it, no worries. The rest of them, you know. Let's talk these with you.
Hey, how was your taco thingy? Your taco?
Oh, it went really well.
Taco thingy.
I heard taco
You
thing.
had tacos?
I like tacos.
It went really, really well. I'm just super tired. I got a full head after work, but I used to.
Wings are always
Yes, it's good though. It was nice, and kind of got home. I got Tim Hortons Cody, so that was really convenient. Yeah.
very cool.
I still don't have what a beautiful name. I have Reckless Love, and I don't have the newer one.
Oh, that's okay. I made a copy
Okay.
for you, and I was gonna I even made you a Reckless Love with no chords, so that you can see the lyrics too. But you already know it.
We're pretty in Sarah and Natalie.
I thought maybe we could share this morning. I can always make a copy for you though.
Only a little bit in. Good though. It's all like
You can share.
thing.
But
Smooth.
I can always make you a copy though if you don't want to share.
It's okay.
First.
It's such a cool clock.
Oh, you guys, it's awesome. Here, look at some light. Light. Yeah. So where'd you go to ski, Christy?
We went to Shasta.
Oh, nice.
I got to snowboard once at Shasta and ski on that same trip, and I like skiing better.
Yeah, we saw a lot of snowboarders sitting on their butt.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was snowboarding, that I was on my butt a lot.
I've never snowboarded.
And like my friend who's better at snowboarding, I asked him, "Am I on my butt more than you, or you know, is this just normal for snowboarders?" He's like, "No, actually, you're standing up way more than I would, because I was a skier. It's like weird to sit down and ski. It's like can't actually do it properly. But
It's not even when they fall, they're just like taking a risk.
yeah, like if you're on skis and you fall over, you stand back up. Because not standing back up will probably pull a muscle.
How was basketball?
Good.
Good.
Wait. It's not that good.
It was not good?
No, we got defeated so bad. Like last year we were so good. But then I don't have like anybody on my team anymore. I only have like a couple of people that I know. Well, I know them now, but
It always helps when you feel like you know your teammates.
yeah.
You know how to play with them and how they play.
Yeah.
That's hard. But there's always more games. Can you come back? Okay. You can get them back. Do you play the same like school multiple times? Or do you always
So
rotate
this
out?
year there's only 3 teams, including us. So we've already gone against every single team.
Oh wow.
Friday.
So you get to go like play them all over again. Season's still going.
Yeah, but we only have 2 double headers, so we have 1 double header.
Well then you have second. You literally have a second chance.
Yeah.
Kick their butts.
What are your other games?
This one, the last one. So Daniel, the
Yeah?
first song's a new song,
The first one?
Yeah.
Okay.
and I can type it in
Don't sweat it.
later.
He's not singing along.
I mean, I didn't make the slide yet for it.
Oh.
Hold on, sorry. What? Where's my? Sorry, girls. One second. So it must be. Hold on. I did. I work so hard trying to open every door. Search near and far, turning over every stone. I close my eyes, instead I find no rest, no rest. For us is hard. All I've been chasing, putting my faith in, let it fade, let it break into pieces. Just give me Jesus. Just give me Jesus. There's nothing I desire that can be found in you. You're everything that I've ever needed. Just give me Jesus. Just give me Jesus. Take all my pride, my dreams, my plans. This house I've built on troubled sand. Fighting the world, it'll never be enough. Oh, I've been chasing, putting my faith in, let it fade, let it break into pieces. Just give me Jesus, Jesus. Just give me Jesus. There's nothing I desire that can't be found in you. You're everything that I've ever needed. Just give me Jesus. Just give me Jesus. Oh, I've been searching, trying to be perfect. All the fears, all the lies I believed in. And all I've been chasing, putting my faith in, let it fade, let it fall into pieces. Just give me Jesus. Just give me Jesus. There's nothing I desire that can't be
Just give me Jesus. Where's all that I desire? That can be found in you. You're everything that I've ever needed. Just give me Jesus. Just give me Jesus.
I'll come back to that song. But yeah, I think I'll just let's do the pre-chorus high every time.
I've been singing, putting my faith in, let it break, let it break into pieces. Just give me Jesus, Jesus.
Yeah, so if you sing the chorus straight through, I'll do the echo. Let's come back to that song later when my fingers are more awake. Okay, reckless love. We're doing this and what's on like not what's written on the side. We're doing the actual like what's over the chord. So
Really playing this one. Before I spoke a word, you were singing out for me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, finds till I'm found. He's the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. I was your foe, still you fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt the world, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, finds till I'm found. He's the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't get down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountains you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't get down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found. Leaves the 99. I couldn't,
my fingers stop working. Hold on. Keep
I
going.
couldn't don't deserve it. Still you.
Let's do the bridge again.
Oh my gosh.
Let's talk right now.
Still shining light up, man in your pilot, coming after me. There's no wall you won't get down, I won't take down, coming after me.
One more time.
Still shining light up, man in your pilot, coming after me. So I won't get down, I won't stay down, coming up to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, endless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, finds till I found leaves and I deny. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
C, and then I'm gonna go straight into the next one. So,
Word at the beginning, one with God the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ. What a beautiful name it is! What a beautiful name it is! The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a beautiful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. You didn't want to live without us. So Jesus, you brought heaven down. My sin is great, your love is greater. What can separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a wonderful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus. You have no rival.
let's actually do a little instrumental actually between the chorus too and the bridge. So, the what a wonderful name it is, the name of Jesus.
Death could not hold you. The hilltop before you. Silence the boast of sin and grave. The heavens are roaring, the praise of your glory. For you are raised to life again. You have no rival, you have no equal, now and forever.
What a powerful name it is. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ. What a powerful name it is. Nothing can stand against. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus.
Alright, and I thought about it. I'm gonna switch up the first one because I think it's just not very,
You're what? Crashing, got it.
Instead, and I want you pick one. Hopefully, you can do it too.
Okay, go ahead.
If you're feeling healthy enough. Which one do you want to do? Tell me.
Uh-oh.
And I think
What happened?
I'm thinking we should. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know what.
Oh, the stand. It's been forever since we've done that one. Let's try that one. Try that one here. I see us in next to my place.
Are you
Oh, perfect. Which one do you have?
You need a little chair?
There, little chair. This one. Oh, perfect. Over there, little chairs. Guess you can have that one. And I think we should. Yeah, I think we should end with that one. So our first song would be Reckless Love, then What a Beautiful Name, and then The Stand. Let's just try it now. How do you feel about The Stand, Christy? Okay, let's go this.
You stood before creation, eternity in your hand. You spoke the earth into motion, my soul now to stand. You stood before my failure and carried the cross from my shame. My sin weighed upon your shoulders, my soul now to stand. So what can I say? What can I say? What can I do? What can I do? Over this heart of mine, completely to you. Salvation, your spirit alive in me. It's like to declare your promise, my soul now to stand. What can I say? What can I say? What can I do? What can I do? Over this world completely to you. Again, so what can I say? What can I say? What can I say? What can I do? What can I do? Offer this heart of love completely to you. So I stand with arms high and heart open in all, the one who gave it all. I'll send my soul on to surrender all I am is yours. All I am is yours. I'll stand with arms wide open in all, the one who gave it all. I'll stand my soul unto you, surrender all I am is yours. Jesus, all I am is yours. Jesus, all I am is yours.
And then we would end on G, to instead of hitting that E minor at the very last part, and ignore the side notes there. That's actually one song that I like just playing afterwards. It's let's do that. So first song, Reckless Love, then What a Beautiful Name, and then The Stand. I feel more comfortable with that one. Yeah, cool. How do you feel about this one, Christy? Is that okay? Yeah, that's fine. The chords are too complicated. Cool.
Okay.
Sweetness. Is there anything you guys want to know one more time? What do you call it good?
You can have all 4 songs in.
You do? Oh, thank you. I will. I'm so sorry.
Wow. Is that even specific?
We just have to break that. What? Maybe. That's okay. That works. You girls are awesome. An awesome job just whipping out the stand. That was great. Here you go. Locked and loaded. That was awesome. You are right.
Thank you. All right, ladies, as soon as you are ready, let's start.
Hold on.
As soon as you are ready, let us begin.
Okay, we're ready.
All right, everyone who's not on the worship team, come grab a chair. And in fact, worship team, you're welcome to grab one now.
Thanks for getting our sound. Goodness.
Very welcome. Kind of berries.
Very too.
Like me some blueberries.
Wow, that was adorable. Oh my goodness. Girls. Yay. Sorry, Daniel, you're outnumbered this morning.
That's all right.
Which is usually the opposite. Usually there's no girls first service. Okay, cool.
You guys should take ownership of it, and then I'll start showing up on Wednesday. Because right now,
Is there no girls on
there's
Wednesday?
one girl. It is only Lulu on Wednesday.
Oh, Lulu. I mean, she can handle it, but
Yeah,
that's a little
she
sad.
got like 3 girl leaders.
Oh
like the
my
last 2 weeks running,
gosh.
which I'm sure was cool. But
That's funny.
she
That
loves
was
you
like
guys.
my whole life. Okay. All right. I'm going to open us in prayer and then let's worship the Lord together. Lord, I just thank you so much for this beautiful morning and these beautiful sisters that you've brought here today. I just ask that you bless our time in worship and just worshiping your name. And a lot of these songs just talk about how we should just worship your name. What a beautiful name. God, you are just so righteous and wonderful. I know that we can't give you enough, but I just ask that in this time we just give you our all. We would just pour our hearts out to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, finds till I'm found, even I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your first, you love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. I felt the worst, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, finds till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, till you give yourself away. Holy, overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, no you won't take down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no way you won't get down, no you won't take down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, finds till I'm found, leaves the 99. How could you earn it? I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
The name of Jesus Christ, what a beautiful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. You didn't want to live without us. And Jesus, you brought heaven down. My sin was great, your love was greater. What could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a wonderful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus. Death could not hold you. Revealed tore before you. Silence the boast of sin and grave. The heavens are roaring, the praise of your glory, for you are raised to life again. You have no rival, you have no equal, now and forever, God, you reign. Yours is the kingdom, yours is the glory, yours is the name above all names. What a powerful name it is, what a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a powerful name it is. Nothing can stand against. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus. Please stand with me for the last song. You stood before creation, eternity in your hand. You spoke the earth into motion, my soul now to stand. You stood before my failure and carried the cross through my shame. My sin weighed upon your shoulders, my soul now to stand. What can I say? What can I say? What can I do? What can I do? Offer this heart, oh God, completely to you. I walk upon salvation. Your spirit alive in me. It's like to declare your promise, my soul now to stand. What in all, the one who gave it all. I'll stand my soul, Lord, to you surrender all. I am is yours. I'll stand with arms high and heart abandoned in all, the one who gave it all. I'll stand my soul, Lord, and you surrender all. I am is yours. Jesus, all I am is yours. Jesus, all I am is yours. God, you are so amazing, Lord. I thank you again for everyone you brought here this morning and everyone you will bring here later today. And as always, I just ask that you speak through Daniel as he teaches us from your word, God. Just ask that you'd help us remember the lesson today, and that you would just lead on our hearts, and that we could just be able to recall it whenever you need us to, Lord, that you would just bring scripture to memory, and we would just be able to meditate on it daily, God. Meditate on you. We give you this time in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, girls. Alrighty. If you brought your own Bible, cool. Open it up to Mark chapter 9. If you didn't, grab one off the shelf. Grab my tea. Minis. Forever. This is from back in high school. Alrighty, Mark chapter 9, starting down at verse 14. Probably one of my favorite stories in Mark.
Mine too.
Do you know which one it is?
Yeah, it's the one. Wait, the 10. Mark 10.
No, this is 9.
Oh, 9. Oh, yeah, 9's my favorite.
That one too, huh?
It's the trans.
We did that one last week.
I knew it. I remember that one. It's the.
Yeah.
I thought we
Are
did that
you
one.
secretly a criminal? Because you talk like one.
Yeah.
like a confidence artist, you know? Just yeah. Oh man, I love that band. I think I've been to probably 10 of their concerts. They stopped touring before you were born. Yeah. I've got like all these live recordings my parents took while they were there. Yeah. Anyways, all right. So today we're actually looking at one of my favorite stories in the book of Mark.
Verse 14.
The 14.
The
Why don't you tell us how the story goes, Mandy? Why don't you just lay it on us?
He healed a demon possessed boy, and then yeah.
Oh, good story. Great, loved it.
Yeah, and then it's over.
All right, so last week Jesus went up onto a mountain with 3 of his guys. Then on that mountain, Jesus was transformed into his heavenly persona, his heavenly form. So he was shining with light, he was glowing. Moses and Elijah showed up to say hi. God was there, he spoke to them. And the 3 guys, Peter, James, and John, were just kind of freaked out into silence, except for Peter. Peter can't stay silent for very long, and so he actually spoke up. God reprimands Peter, and then they come back down the mountain, and Jesus gives them this nugget to chew on. He says, does anyone remember? don't tell anybody till I'm back from the dead. Don't tell anybody about the whole glowing Jesus, the heavenly form, the meeting up with Elijah and Moses, the speaking of God from heaven. Don't tell anybody about that until after I come back from the dead. And then the three guys were like, "When does come back from the dead?" They didn't get it. They didn't know what come back from the dead meant. They were confused because they thought, like many had thought, that the Messiah would not die. Because there were verses that said he would reign forever. He would be king, and then he would be king forever. It would never end. And you can kind of take that literally, and it means he doesn't die. It's really hard to stay king once you're dead. So people read those verses in the Old Testament, and they took it to heart, which was good, but they didn't necessarily understand all that the Old Testament was teaching. The Old Testament was teaching that the Messiah would come and suffer and die, but he wouldn't be enthroned until after his death. He wouldn't get to sit on the throne and reign and rule until after he died, and then he rose from the dead. Then once he got on the throne, he would live forever. He would reign forever. And so there's an order. First comes the death, then the resurrection, then reigning and ruling as king forever. They miss this, and so when he says rise from the dead, they're confused. Right? That doesn't make any sense. He's not even supposed to die. Now we move on. They come back down the mountain. You've got those three guys who are with Jesus. There's 4 total. And they're coming back down, and they're going to meet up with the other 9 apostles. Go find them. Okay, so that's where we're picking up today. Lexi, could you start us off in verse 14?
Whoa, okay. And they came to the disciples who saw a great multitude around them, and the scribes disputing with them.
And verse 15.
When the crowd saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with awe, and they ran to greet him. What is all this arguing about? Cuneo asked. One of the men in the crowd spoke up and said, Teacher, I brought my son so you could heal him. He is possessed by an evil spirit that won't let him talk.
And whenever the spirit seizes him, it throws him violently to the ground. Then he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth, and he becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast out the evil spirit, but they couldn't do it.
He answered him and said, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me.
So they brought the boy, but when the evil spirit saw Jesus, it threw the child into a violent convulsion, and he fell to the ground, writhing and foaming at the mouth.
Okay, pause there. So Jesus comes down the hill. Someone says, we need your help. Now, ordinarily, this happens to Jesus all the time. But typically, when he's been gone and comes back, he's got all of his apostles with him when he leaves. So usually when he comes back, there wasn't anyone left with the crowds to try and heal someone. So this is kind of a new occurrence, where the apostles tried to do it without Jesus, and they couldn't do it. And if you recall, because we're in chapter 9, we've been in Mark a while, the apostles have actually gone off on their own in other instances. It was different, though. It's where Jesus said, I'm giving you power, and I want you to go out in pairs, so 6 groups of 2. I want you to go out all over the countryside, and I want you to teach like I've been teaching. I want you to heal like I've been healing. I want you to help people like I've been helping people. I want you guys to practice what I've been showing you. Go do it. And they come back, and they're like, Jesus, you'll never believe what happened. We tried to work a miracle, and we did. We tried to cast out a demon, and we did. Like, the demon left. They were surprised that even though Jesus said, I'm giving you power to do this stuff, did it actually work? So we know that they can work miracles. We know that they can cast out a demon. God's given them that power. They've actually practiced. They've done it before. And we know that there's 9 of the apostles here, so even if only 1 guy in every pair got to do it, there's still people here that did cast out a demon before this moment, and yet they can't do it. So this is why when Jesus gets there, he doesn't respond with the normal Jesus response of, bring him to me, I'll do it. He responds with a, why is this generation so lacking in faith? That's what his response is. It's interesting. You got to know, he's not responding like that to the boy, right? There's the boy who's hurting, the boy who's possessed, the boy who has need, and Jesus is not talking about that boy when he says, oh, faithless generation. He's talking about his apostles. His apostles. Now, why would that be? Why would Jesus say, oh, this faithless generation? Any thoughts? You can just guess. You don't have to know the answer.
Because if they had faith, they would have been able to cast out the demon.
Yeah, that's pretty logical and straightforward, actually. If they had had faith in the power that Jesus gave them before, if they had had faith in God, who was providing the power in all of these instances, that it would have been something that they were able to do, but they didn't. Now, for many of us, we don't have the faith that we think we need to go and cast out a demon. For many of us, we don't have the faith we think we need to go and to put our hands on someone and heal them of a real doctor noted illness. But that's mostly because of the doubt that we have. So this is why Jesus is upset, because they had already gone through the experience of doing exactly what was required of them here. They've already gone through the experience. So for us who haven't, for all of us who've never cast out a demon, it's a little more understandable that we don't feel like we have the faith required to cast out a demon. Does that make sense? Never done it. If I asked you, can you lift up 100 pounds? You might not know the answer because maybe you never actually tried to lift up 100 pounds, or something that actually said, this weighs 100 pounds. You go through your memory, and you think of the heaviest thing you've ever picked up, you might not know the exact weight of it. But maybe you could lift 100 pounds. Now, how would you know whether or not you could lift 100 pounds before you lift 100 pounds? Does that make sense? Like, how do you actually know if you've never done it? Think about it. This isn't a trick question. If I told you that your PE class was going to require this at the end of the year, that you can lift 100 pounds, what would you have to do to think, I'll pass that test?
No, you can lift 95 pounds.
There it is. There it is. That's thinking. So you start with what you absolutely know you can lift. I could lift 20 pounds. Lift 20 pounds. Cool. How hard was that? How easy was that? Do you need to work up to 30, or could you just jump to 30? How easy was the 20? How hard do you think 30 will be? Then you try 30. Oh, actually, that wasn't that hard. So you keep going. You keep going. And when you hit 95, and you can do 95, then you're thinking, I could do 100. I mean, what's 5 more pounds? Really? I mean, that's like a heavy jacket versus a light jacket. I could do that. This is the same with faith. You work your way up. You don't go from I have zero faith to I am moving the mountain now. That's not how faith works. You have to spend time with God. You walk alongside of him. He moves you through circumstances and gets you there. This is why when Jesus sent them out to go cast out demons, he didn't say, I got a surprise waiting for you. Go see what it is. He didn't say that. If they got there and there was a demon-possessed person, you know what they would have done? They would have come back. Jesus, you probably didn't know, but there's a demon-possessed person over there in that city you sent me to, so if you could come and help me out, that'd be great. But he didn't do that. He sent them and he says, I'm sending you with power to cast out demons. And then you're just going, ha ha ha. First half of the way there, you're on cloud 9. You're just ecstatic. You're so happy. Like, Jesus gave me power. Second half of the way there, you're thinking like, oh my gosh, this is really going to happen. I'm going to go to a place and there's going to be a person and they're going to be possessed by a demon and I'm going to cast them out. And then like the last 10 feet, you're going, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. But Jesus is smart. He sent them in pairs. So even as one man may have had doubts and come back and said, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. 2 people can walk into a city and go, you with me? Yeah, I'm with you. Okay, let's do this. And you can do it. Jesus was really wise with his apostles. So now they've been through all that. He ramped them up. He got them there slowly. He walked them through the experience. They did it on their own without him. And then it happens again and they can't. What happened? Kind of have to guess. There isn't a clear answer. We can keep reading. The answer is not crystal clear. Jesus does give us a hint right at the end, though. So let's keep reading. Who read last? I forgot where we stopped.
We're on Christy.
Okay, Christy, pick us up at
21.
21. Thank you. I wasn't sure if we did 20.
How long has this been happening? Jesus asked the boy's father. He replied, since he was a little boy. The spirit often throws him into the fire or into water, trying to kill him. Have mercy on us and help us if you can.
What do you mean, if I can? Jesus asked. Anything is possible if a person believes.
Immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. When Jesus saw that the fire of the onlookers was burning, he rebuked the evil spirit Listen, you spirit that makes this boy unable to hear and speak. He said, I command you to come out of this child and never enter him again. Then the spirit screamed and threw the boy into another violent convulsion and left him. The boy appeared to be dead. A murmur ran through the crowd as people said, he's dead. But Jesus
Got this.
But Jesus took him by the hand and helped him to his feet, and he stood up.
Afterward, when Jesus was alone in the house with his disciples, they asked him, why couldn't we cast out that evil spirit?
So he said to them, this kind can come out by nothing but prayer and fasting.
You'll notice Lexi's version is more original. Hers says prayer and fasting. Ours says prayer. Notice there's an asterisk, though. Little 6-point star. Check out the bottom of the page. Find the one that matches the verse number. So it'll say 929 at the bottom of your page.
Found it.
And it says, you want to read it? Go for it.
Some manuscripts read by prayer and fasting.
Okay, so notice how it says by prayer and fasting in italics, where it's like, it's diagonal writing. So that's the quote, by prayer and fasting. That first part says some manuscripts read. So manuscript, does anyone know what that word is? It's a weird word.
Yes, I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So manuscript is a copy of a book that's written by hand.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Handwritten versus printed on a press or by a printer, something like that. So a manuscript is handwritten. So what we have in our hands right here, this is an English translation of an ancient document that took hundreds of years to write. It was written by many, many different authors. And those authors all lived before the printing press was invented. Does that make sense? Like every single book in here was written before the printing press ever was even dreamed of. So every book in here was originally written with a pen, by hand. But there was actually a lot of years in between those writers writing it and the printing press, like a lot of years. So every copy that was ever made, from the original author all the way down to the invention of the printing press, every copy was handwritten. Weird, right? So all of those copies are called manuscripts, and the originals are called manuscripts. They're all manuscripts. Manu, M-A-N-U, it's the root word you find in the other word we use today all the time, manual. Like manual labor, do it manually. Not automatic, it's manual. So that's the idea. It's a script, words on a page, done the hard way. So imagine this whole book, all of its hundreds of pages, all being copied down again and again and again and again by pen. Now, imagine in some of them, there's a word missing. That's weird, right? But they're written by hand. Some people make mistakes. But also, some of these documents we have on paper are so old that there's holes in the pages. And we literally have to get 9, 10, 20, 50 copies of the same book to make sure that we actually have more than one instance of every word on every page. Because in some cases, our oldest copies, the oldest ones we have, are like a weird non-rectangular shape that came from a rectangular page. And that's like all we have is this weird like blobby chunk of a page. And so we take all of these copies where we have hundreds of the Book of Mark, and we have hundreds of this other book, and hundreds of this other book, and we just stack them all. We lay them all out, and we say, okay, what do they all 100% agree on? Where do they differ? Let's see if we can figure out why they differ. Some of the copies older than the other copies? Maybe a word didn't get removed, maybe a word got added. How do you even know the difference? If half of them say it with prayer and fasting, and half of them say it with just prayer, they don't say fasting. How do you know which one it is? Is it the word fasting got added in half, or the word fasting got deleted in half? Which one was the original? The with fasting or the without fasting? Isn't it interesting? It's hard to tell. You have to figure out which one's the older copy. So let's say you have 100 copies and 50 of them have fasting in it and 50 of them don't have fasting. We have to figure out, very simply, okay, are the withs or the without the old ones? Are the withs or the withouts the new ones? So you have to try and establish the age of all of your hundreds of copies. Put them on a timeline, and then try and reconstruct how a word got added, or how a word got deleted. What we usually figure out is that the time is only half as important as the location. Usually, where the manuscript was written tells us so much more than when the manuscript was written. And you can tell this from where you dug it up, from what the paper's made out of, all these different little clues, these little hints the archaeologists get. What we end up figuring out is that usually the copy that was physically closest to the original has the best, most perfect rendition of what the original said. Does that make sense? And the ones that were physically copied in some other country, hundreds of miles away, even if it was a little bit older, maybe it was a little bit later, those ones are usually a little less reliable, a little more prone to having a little extra word in there. Because the author, hundreds of miles away, is writing it for a different audience, and he's thinking in his head as he's copying it word after word after word. I don't think that sentence makes sense. I don't like it. That sentence isn't clear enough. My readers in this country that I'm copying this for, they're not going to get it if it just says that. I gotta fix that. And so they fix it. So this is usually where we get little changes in the manuscripts, is when the copies are being done in some other country, some other city from where the author wrote it, and so the translator or the copier, the scribe as they're called, is writing it down and going, I don't like it. I want to put a word in there. So now we have versions like the NLT, New Living Translation. Now this is not the best translation. There's better translations. This is not really like the most perfect in any one particular way. The reason I chose it, the reason I like the New Living Translation is twofold. Number one, it mostly has words you guys know. Mostly. There's very few times where I have to stop and explain what a word even means. It happens, but it's rare. Sometimes the older translations that we've used here, like New King James or King James Version, they have lots of words that junior hires typically don't know. You don't learn a lot of those words till college. King James Version, just the KJV, it's super duper old, but if you go put it on like a reading scale for difficulty of reading, it usually shows up as postgraduate, like beyond college. That's the reading difficulty level. And the New King James is typically senior high school or first year college reading level for New King James. Weird, right? So I love New King James. I grew up on KJV. I was using King James Version since kindergarten. And so like, if I didn't know a word, I couldn't finish reading the verse. It didn't make any sense to me. So I had to learn all the words. It was kind of cool. But I like the New Living Translation for one other reason. Not only does it have easier words, but it also changes constantly. Doesn't seem right, does it? But it does. It changes constantly. That's why they named it the New Living Translation. Because every time they figure out something archaeologically, every time they figure out something in the manuscripts, every time someone goes, wait a second, we've been looking at this upside down the whole time, and they figure something out, they go back and they edit it. Oh, no, we got to change that. We figured out we were wrong. Oh, no, we got to, change that, swap that, move that over here. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I thought you were raising your hand.
My bad. I do
So-
have a fun fact though.
Go for it.
In my Bible, this is New King James.
Yeah.
I have Strong's Concordance in the back.
Sweet.
And the only other time that they mention prayer with fasting
Together?
together is actually when they're talking about marriage
Nice.
and between a husband and wife. And it says, so that'd be 1 Corinthians 7:5.
Okay.
It says, do not deprive one another except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan does not tempt you because you lack self-control. But it's with the, still with the warding off of something demonic, which is interesting.
That is
It's
interesting.
kind of along the same lines. And the other time that it's mentioned is when it's talking about something demonic.
It totally fits too, because that's what fasting is for. Not demonic things,
Right.
but rather for honing yourself.
Right.
For making yourself of one purpose, of one mind. So, and that's why it fits here. This is why it makes sense here to add the word fasting. But as far as we can tell, it would have been added based on the geography of the manuscripts, based on the age of the manuscripts. So they took it back out in the New Living Translation. I think it's a good clarifying word, though. I think it makes sense as a clarifying word, because I think a lot of readers would have read prayer and go, they didn't think to pray. Like, they were standing there for however many hours with this kid who's demonically possessed, and they didn't think once to pray. That doesn't seem right. But there's a clarification there, and it makes sense in context, that he doesn't mean prayer like say a quick prayer. He doesn't mean that. Well, why do I know that? Why do I know he doesn't mean say a quick prayer is not what he means? Because he said they were faithless. And saying a quick prayer does not increase or decrease your faith. Your faith is not going to change all of a sudden because you said, hey, God, please help me with this. Amen. You're not going to get like a level up in faith from that. Faith is brought on by spending time with God. And if your prayer is 15 seconds, you can kind of do the math. How much faith is that going to increase in you? Did you really spend time with God? Or did you kind of throw some words at him like a grenade and just hope for the best? So when Jesus says prayer, I think saying fasting too is just a really good way to clarify, what do you mean by prayer? There's a lot of kinds of prayer. But fasting is something you do for a period of time. If you don't fast for at least a day, I don't think most people would call it a fast. Does that make sense? Like if you're fasting and you're like, yeah, I've been fasting for the last 3 hours. I can barely take this any longer. Right? 3 hours, that's nothing. So if you tack the word fasting onto the word prayer like this, then suddenly you're like, oh, so like praying for a long time, like really praying, like you prayed all day and then you kept going the next day. That's a lot. That's the kind of thing that really would boost your faith. That's the kind of preparation you would need to tackle something bigger than you. And so, yeah, in context, I think it makes perfect sense to throw that word on there just to help the reader go, what is he talking about? So Jesus says this to his apostles, and I think this starts to unlock why they failed in the first place. Why they failed in the first place was because Jesus had been gone for over a day now. They were flying without him. And he didn't send them somewhere and say, go cast out demons. He left them there. And their minds started to turn. What if he was like, what if this is the end? What if he took those 3 and now he's going to get a new group? Because he took 3, he didn't take us. Why didn't he take us? He always takes all of us. This time he didn't take us. You get the worry and you get the doubt, and suddenly the faith in the background is just like slowly shrinking. As the doubts and the fear increase. Now, while Jesus was gone, they had gone into solitude, they had prayed, they'd been fasting, they'd been talking to God the whole time he was gone. I don't think their faith would have shrunk. I think their faith would have been just fine. It might have actually grown. In the trial of not having their leader with them, the trial of not having their best friend with them, if they'd been instead spending time with God in prayer, I think their faith would have been fine. And then this demon-possessed boy comes along, they would have been talking to God the whole time. Who knows? Maybe they would have been expecting him. But that's not what happened. That's not what happened. So when Jesus casts out the boy, casts out the demon from the boy, how come Jesus didn't need to stop and have a fasting period? How come Jesus didn't need to pray for a day straight and get ready? Any thoughts on that? He just says it. Here we go, casting out the demon now. The demon writhes on the ground and finally screams and leaves the boy. Jesus didn't really look like he was trying that hard. That's because his faith hadn't fallen. His faith was perfect. Not to mention the fact he just had a mountaintop experience where God says, this is my son in whom I am pleased. If Jesus didn't have perfect faith, if it was me up there on that mountain, let's say, I think my faith would be pretty well boosted at that point. This is my son. I am pleased in him. Like that just, I'd be floating down that mountain. Get back, you give me any task. Oh, you want the sea emptied? Let me at it, I'll do it. My faith would be just cloud high. That'd be amazing. But Jesus doesn't need that. He didn't need a booster shot. He didn't need to be picked up. Jesus had perfect faith. So when he came up against something that took a large amount of faith, he was fine. He could handle it. But faith is not done yet in this little section. There's one more thing in here, and it's probably what makes this story my favorite. It's the dad. The dad. He slips. He says what's actually in his mind. When you're in front of someone important, typically, it's better to be quiet or think long and hard about what you say, because your words might have bigger effect than they usually have. When you're in the principal's office, you should not mouth off like you do with your friends. Capiche? Okay, so Jesus is standing there, and the dad says, "Help us if you can." And I'm sure he didn't think about that very hard. I'm sure it just came out because it's how he felt. Help us if you can. Sometimes when you go to someone important for help, maybe you're in the principal's office because you asked to be there because you needed something from the principal. Sometimes you're desperate at that point. You're not there because it was your first option. You're there because it was your last option. You didn't go to the principal's office on day one of the problem. You went at the end of the semester after it's not let up and nothing's changed. Dad's there with Jesus, and he is at the end of his rope. And he says, help us if you can. And Jesus catches him, and he tests him. He says, if I can? You don't think I can? Do you not know that anything is possible for those who believe? Now this is the test, because if you say something like, if you can, that already proves you didn't believe in the first place. Does that make sense? The guy already stated he didn't have full faith. He just offered that up freely in his sentence by saying, if you can. That means you don't think Jesus can. So Jesus then says, did you know anything was possible if you believed? And the guy notices the trap. But he responds perfectly, like what the dad says. I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. What does that mean? How can you believe and not believe? You guys ever gone skydiving?
No, but I want to.
My sister's gone several times now. Talk to Michelle. She's done it a few times. She knows the places that are a little scary and the places that are very, very good. When you go skydiving, you've got to trust your parachute. If you've never seen a parachute in action, a parachute properly performing, I'm not sure you'd do it. You know what I mean? If you grew up never knowing parachutes existed, and then all of a sudden one day your parents drop you off at the skydiving place, you'd be like, okay, wait, what saves me from hitting the ground and going splat? I'm sorry, did you say fabric? Cloth? I'm going to jump out of an airplane and all the technology we have with wings and jet engines and all of this, and I'm going to be jumping out with strings and cloth. Are you insane? That's just scary. You shouldn't do that. You should never jump out of anything with strings holding you up. That should kill you every time 100%. If you jumped off a bridge with strings holding you, what would happen? You'd keep going. That's what would happen. Nothing would slow. You'd go and the string would snap and you just keep going. But suddenly you do it in a special way with enough of them in a bag on your back. Like, that's never happened. I'm never jumping out of an airplane with a backpack on. Backpacks don't save your life. They carry books. That's what backpacks do.
Amen, brother.
Amen. Amen. But even if you're a normal human being, you know what parachutes are, you've heard about them your whole life, you've even seen them in action, and you're up in that airplane with a awesome thousands of dollar parachute that you're renting for an hour on your back, and you know it's going to work because you've seen them work before, it's still scary to jump out of an airplane, right? And you know the parachute should work, that it's worked so many times before, but are you willing to say, I know it's going to work this time? Nope. Not everyone is. Many, many, many people will never say yes to that experience, even though they know the parachutes work thousands and thousands and thousands of times. They're still not going to do it. This is where the dad is. This is belief but unbelief. I believe in God, but there are still things he could do to me that would test my belief. There are still things he could walk me through with his hand outstretched saying, come on, Daniel, one more step, and I would still be scared to go through it. I would still have doubts as I walked through it. But I would also still know that my God was there with me. That he had his hand outstretched and he was waiting to pick me up if I fell, to lead me on if I got lost. My God's there. I know he's there. He's never going to let me go. I am certain of that, and yet scary things are scary. Hard things are hard. And so the dad just says it, honestly. I do believe. Help me with my unbelief. Because I got both. And that is the crazy thing about humans. We can have two opposites inside us at once. We're so weird like that we can believe in God and yet have unbelief. But we do. Don't be ashamed of that. Don't hide it. Don't pretend it's not there. Don't act like you have perfect belief while you have pockets of unbelief. Because all that does, I mean, frankly, that's like having a cold and just going to school anyways. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to take vitamins, you're not going to eat soup, you're not going to take it easy, you're not going to rest. You're just going to be like, oh, I'll get through this. You know what that gets you? Pneumonia. That gets you nothing good. Do not just pretend that you are not sick. You have to actually deal with that illness that's inside of you. So just the same as a Christian with unbelief, just me to you being honest, I have pockets of unbelief. I have things I'm not ready to give over. I have things I haven't outgrown. I have problems that I don't know the solution to. I am not perfect. And so when this dad confronts Jesus and Jesus says, are you lacking in belief? The dad says, oh no, I have belief. But yeah, I'm lacking in belief. I'm lacking. He doesn't just admit it though. He goes the one extra step. He says, help me, please. Help me with my unbelief. I don't want to be alone in this. I don't want to sit here and worry and doubt anymore. I don't want to suffer because I'm not perfect. I want a God who loves me and is willing to help me because I'm imperfect. And Jesus is that God. That's exactly who Jesus is. And so the guy says, help me with my unbelief, and Jesus immediately goes into action. Did you notice that Jesus doesn't answer the dad? The dad says, help me with my unbelief. Boom! Jesus goes to cast out the demon. That is my God. The dad asks for help and Jesus goes into action. I love that. And so that's what we see today. We see people lacking faith, and then we see Jesus responding to both. The apostles lacked faith, the dad lacked faith. The apostles complained and were scared and didn't know what to do. The dad says, help me, please. Jesus' response to them both was completely different. Jesus was frustrated with the apostles. Jesus was compassionate with the Father. And the difference was, what did they do with their unbelief? The apostles just went in circles. They struggled with it. They didn't know what to do about it. They thought it was something they should be ashamed of and just kind of pretended like it wasn't there. And the dad says, yep, that's me. I got unbelief. Help. And so this is the lesson to us. When we are lacking, do not stay alone. When we have pockets of doubt, when we have fears, do not sit and think that you're going to handle it on your own. If you could, you wouldn't have those doubts. If you could handle it on your own, you wouldn't be afraid in those moments. You just handle it. The fact that you have them says you need help. That's what the Bible, that's what the whole Old Testament is trying to point us to, is that by the time Jesus shows up, by the time, if you read from the beginning all the way up to the Gospels, you should know by now you're not going to make it on your own. You need help. So Jesus gives it freely. I think that's really one of the biggest messages in life, is that Jesus is willing and ready to help those who need it. That's it for today. We're going to pray. Lord, we thank you that you're willing to help us. We thank you that you're here for us. Help us with our pockets of doubt. Help us with our unbelief. As much of it may still exist, Lord, be there for us. Help us. Reach out to us. Lord, may we have the courage to admit when we are lacking in faith. And Lord, give us remembrance. Give us that control of our time where we actually spend it with you. Help us to realize when we haven't spent time with you, maybe for a whole week, maybe for a whole month. Help us to do what the apostles seem to fail at here, and just spend time with you when we're afraid. Praying to you, fasting if necessary. Help us to listen for your answers. We ask for all of this in your name, Jesus. But if there's someone here this morning, you're sitting here, and I know it's a small group, but that's okay. If you're scared and you need help, you need prayer right now, Maybe you need just a quiet moment where you can stop and talk with Lexi or stop and talk with Emily for a bit before you leave. I just want you to raise up your hand. Everyone's eyes are closed. They're not going to see this. I just want to know if there's something you're struggling with and you need a helping hand right now. I just want you to put up a hand. I'll know, and I'll send one of my girl leaders your way. Anything this morning? Well, beyond that, if there's anyone this morning, maybe you haven't actually given your life to the Lord and you've just been coming to church. It's okay. But now's the time to make a change. If you've never before said, Jesus, take my whole life and take my sins, I don't want them anymore. I want forgiveness. If you want to say that right now and just start that walk with Him, start your whole life over, you can raise up your hand right now. Just say, Jesus, I need your forgiveness. I'll pray with you. I'll lead you in that. And you can start the most amazing relationship you'll ever have. Anyone this morning? All right, well, Lord, I thank you for these girls. Bless them as they go. Use them in their schools and their families, with all their friends, Lord. Just make them an amazing witness to the people that they come into contact with. We ask that in your name. Amen. I love you, girls. Thank you so much for bearing with a tiny, tiny class. I enjoyed it. You guys read amazingly. I know you don't always feel like it, but you do. Oh yeah. How many phones do we have? Let's see if we can count this. Oh look! This white Samsung phone, it won. Amazing. What would you like? Uh,
Daniel? Sulei's office?
There's a little